Yeah, that really makes sense. Something else, talking about this damage, and you and I both agree that, I think the accumulation of damage, intracellular, so inside the cell, outside of cells, on cell membranes, proteins, DNA, on and on. I think that is a driver of aging and essentially causes aging.
I would say it is aging.
Yeah. And I focus more on an easier solution, which is the nutritional aspects of preventing or of allowing your body to, metabolize and produce energy the best it can. And even though you're still going to age, like even if you're at the optimal amount, even if you have the optimum amount of, micronutrients, you have these minerals and vitamins that are essential to run your metabolism, they're essential to run enzymes that repair damage, so on. The fact is you will still age. The question is, how much better will you age?
Yeah, exactly. The question is how much better. And I'm all for all of that work. A large part of why Bruce and I became friends a long time ago was because I absolutely endorse the idea that we need to do the best we can for the population to get them to an average level of nutrition. But I think the critical thing to understand is average. If you ask about the difference in terms of health expectancy and life expectancy between, let's say, the middle 10% of the population and the bottom 10%, it's a large difference. And that's the difference that we're talking about here, the difference that Bruce is trying to do something about by making sure that if the poor won't eat fruit, then at least they have a multivitamin and so on. But if you look at the opposite end of the spectrum, if you look at the difference between the middle 10% and the top 10% in terms of health expectancy and life expectancy, it's basically nil. Of course, I'm factoring out genetics here. I'm talking about lifestyle. I'm talking about things that we can modify. And that's really important to remember because it's so easy from the popular press and so on to get the impression that if you just do what your mother told you to and do it really well, you eat a really good diet and you get a lot of exercise and you never drink anything and you never smoke and so on, then you're actually going to live 20 years longer than you otherwise would. When in fact, the message of all of the data we have, epidemiological or anything, is that it's probably closer to 2 years, if that. The example I like to give is just a very simple one, looking at national life expectancies. So people laugh at the USA a great deal because of the fact that it sits at number something like 45 in the league table of longevity among the industrialized world, despite the fact that you guys spend far more per head on medical care than anybody else. But if you look at the absolute numbers and you look at the actual difference in number of years in life expectancy between the USA and the number one big country, namely Japan, it's only 4 years. Only 4 years.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with this data. It's 5 years, actually. The average lifespan expectancy in the United States is 79. In Japan, it's 84. And what's really interesting, so first of all, I'm not sure that Japan has the optimal diet. In general, they're getting all the micronutrients. There's a lot of factors here. But what I do find interesting is if you look at the data. So right now, the average difference is 5 years, and in between males, it's 4 years. Between females, it's 6 years. Okay. If you look at the data from 2012, 2013, Japan has gone down in their life expectancy. So their average life expectancy has gone down by a year. U.S. has gone down by a year. So there was a bigger difference. It was 6 years. But what's really interesting is that the male life expectancy in Japan has gone down by 4 years, almost 4 years, 3.6.
Okay, so these are the kinds of fluctuation in data that I find very untrustworthy.
Yeah. I think that, it's possible that, Japan's becoming more westernized. Males also smoke like chimneys over there. So, there's a lot of other factors that, come into play.
Could be that, could be quality of data,
Could be quality of data, exactly. I think that if, like you mentioned earlier, if you really want to look at the effect of diet on lifestyle, then, looking at obesity, obesity is associated with a 7-year reduction in lifespan.
Yeah,
Morbid obesity is associated with 14-year reduction.
Oh, don't get me wrong, of course, but that's the low end versus middle that I was talking about.
But it's a growing problem in the United States. Obesity is
well aware of that. Jael Shansky, of course, has been very prominent in publicizing this problem and predicting that unless we do something very serious about the obesity epidemic, then we are in danger of seeing a fall in the life expectancy in the USA. But of course, we haven't seen that yet because the problem is too new.
It's what?
The problem is too new.
Too new, yeah. So I do think that, I talk a lot about what role micronutrients have in diet and in metabolism. I mean, B vitamins are running your mitochondria, magnesium is needed for DNA repair enzymes, vitamin K is needed to blood coagulate, on and on. So, it also plays a very important role. And I do think it absolutely affects the way you age, especially if you're talking about living in an unhealthy, eating refined carbohydrate sort of diet versus eating your greens and exercise and things like that. But even with that said, and doing all those things, you're still going to age because you can't stop the breathing in oxygen and eating food, this process that, is coupled together to make energy. Well, it's inherently makes damage. Yeah. And there's no stopping it. No matter what amount of nutrients
which, of course,
you
is
get.
exactly where I came in back in 2000 with the realization that even though we couldn't stop this damage from being created,